Now that President Muhammad Buhari has inaugurated his cabinet and his ministers are settling into their roles, some of them will be in charge of ministries they are familiar with, while others will move into uncharted waters. Good afternoon and welcome to Standpoint. I'm Ibrahim Shita. With me in the studio to talk more on President Buhari's newly formed cabinet is a public affairs analyst, DeVeo Okorie. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
And then President Muhammad Buhari on Wednesday retained his position as the Minister of Petroleum Resources. He also created 3 new ministries and separated and merged some others. Reactions have then been trailing the assignment of portfolios to some of the personalities. Adamu was the butt of the jokes on Twitter after he was assigned the Education Ministry, with the Nigerians saying he's a misfit for the ministry. The Nigeria's challenges require a cabinet with a generous dose of credible technocrats to drive the economy, quell insecurity, and instill cohesion, probity, and efficiency into the anti-corruption war. So, bearing all of these things in mind, do you see square pegs or do you see round pegs in round holes?
Round holes. That is a question that, depending on the perspective you look at it from, will give you an answer. It's clear already. I mean, there's no gainsaying that Buhari made his selection based on party loyalship and political considerations. It was more or less on the technical side in terms of meritorious track records as to what they were going to do. Secondly, the process that brought them in after the appointments, they didn't have portfolios. So they were screened without an understanding of where they were going. And in so doing, how do we then say that we're putting square? There was no hole to put the round peg into.
Okay, we are going to have to explore some of the role of these ministers, the portfolio that is assigned to them. For instance, Minister of Interior, Rauf Aregbesola, shocked Nigerians when he confessed that he doesn't know anything about the Ministry of Interior, of that ministry, and except for what he reads on the pages of newspapers. The Honorable Minister is being honest, do you think?
Is he? Well, I know Rauf. For those that know him, he has a sense of humor, a very strong sense of humor, just like our President, Buhari. And when politicians speak, you should learn to take what they say with a pinch of salt. He was a governor.
Right.
So he did have
a two-term governor.
Yeah, so he did have some form of interior commission within his state. And usually for the ministries, agencies that are under the Interior Ministry, I'm sure he knew exactly what it was about. However, maybe he said that in a view of maybe that was not the ministry he was expecting. And even if he didn't know, and let's give him that, let's say he's a complete novice, which we know he's not, there are books to read, as simple as that, as basic as that.
Well maybe what he's trying to say, because if you look at the governing a country, a state is different from doing it on a broad scale, on a larger scale, looking at Nigeria, the composition and how large the country is.
Yes.
So it might be very, very sincere, saying, maybe I don't know other states, maybe I don't know what it takes to be a Minister of Interior in other states. So, and some are interpreting it as, is it that he's saying that I'm not going to perform?
I think he threw a gauntlet in the air that people ran off with. I am not at any point confused as to whether he has the capacity or the knowledge to be able to deliver. Remember, ministerial appointments are about leadership. Infrastructure, paraphernalia, agencies, they're all there to help the minister drive the agenda of the presidency. So let's not spend too much time on it. Like I said, I think it was a pinch of salt, a joke that he threw into the air. We've known Rauf to be a maverick. He's said many things. He's done many ideological interventions in his past that we know most times when he starts with it, most people don't understand.
All right, let us explore power. President Muhammad Buhari has invested 900 billion naira, on power, bearing in mind the $16 billion that was, unaccounted for by the previous administration, that's the PDP administration. And now the Federal Executive Council has approved the contract for the engineering work of the Mambila hydroelectric power plant in Taraba State. And that's the sum of $5.792 billion. So with Saleh Maman, Godi Jedi Agba, who are overseeing power, we should hope for the best from the power sector.
Well, I don't know, because his history hasn't been so much as to the power industry. I think there are many doubts in that area. And the question would be, what was the thinking of the presidency in making such a selection, given the fact that power is like our #1 challenge in this country, holding back our advanced developments. So much is tied to power. It has a multiplier effect. Left to me, if there was a one-point agenda before or after security, that would be power. Because if you solve power, you get the dividends of practically every other ministry. So do I see him advancing the power ministry? I'm not sure at this point in time.
It has been unbundled because we might also say that with these, do you see the person of Mr. Fashola reenacting his feats in Lagos State as the Lagos State governor, which we're not seeing during his first tenure as the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, having those 3 portfolios, but now he's having 2.
Yes, now that he has 2, of course, they must have done that for the reasons of efficiency. He can't concentrate on the 2. But remember, works and housing are big in their own feats. And one of the things that holds ministers down in implementing their agenda is funding. And works and housing are one of the most fund-gulping ministries to run. Housing alone, Nigeria requires over, I think the last count, if I remember, I can be correct, about 70,000 homes, which we've only done like maybe 20%. So there's a long roadmap. And remember, this is not just about government building houses. It's about government working with the private sector. Yes, government will do their bit, but government enabling the private sector and each and every individual to be able to build his home within his level of income. So not only does he have a funding gap to bridge, he has policies. Remember, there's the Land Use Act, which is still very controversial with many people, both at federal and state level. In terms of the Works Ministry, the first thing that the colonial masters did was to build roads. If you're looking for development, you need to open up access. Everybody's pulling at his leg as to, if you remember during the ministerial screening, the one thing that every senator said was, you didn't work in my area. I have not seen your work in my area. So we all need roads. And there must be a master plan. There must be funding alongside both. Remember, that's when he mentioned about the 10 trillion naira infrastructure fund. We're hoping one way or the other with the cooperation of the National Assembly to be able to get such funds.
So I'm really going to have to take you back to the issue of power. So with all of those things in place now, you see this second administration of the president talking about the next level, that power, they're really going to get it right.
Well, we've known politicians, especially this administration, to be good at sound bites. Sound bites is basically just saying something, promises, but at the end of the day, not able to deliver or even come close to it.
But this is not just mere promises. I just read out the sum of 5.792 billion.
Yeah, well, if you know the amount required in power, you know that that's a drop in the ocean. Remember, the power reform took place in 3 ways. There was generation, there was transmission, and distribution, of which the government held on to the transmission aspect of it. Now, you have heavy complaints of the generation producing way beyond what transmission can even carry. And then at the end of the day, with the ATCs, what they call the additional technical losses that the distribution is suffering. So that amount, yes, is good, but it doesn't take us to Uhuru. Doesn't get us to a place that we can begin to see some of these things. And I think at this point in time, government will need to review the power reform. Maybe they might have to reverse the agreements that were done with some of the owners, as they know. Some of them have even suggested, please come and take your license and give us back our money.
Now, the issue of insecurity, or security generally, is one thing we've been talking about, year in, year out. Most of the time we talk on the program, people talk about insecurity in the country. And for instance, according to Amnesty International, 1,814 persons had been killed by terrorism. We have banditry and Fulani herdsmen attacks and farmers' reprisals and the prevailing bad blood between the police and the Nigerian army, the recent reprisals and all that. So these, among others, are tasked before the new Minister of Defense. That's retired Major General Bashir Magashi. What are your expectations from him?
Well, they've also carved out the police ministry as well. So that, I think, was present some years ago, but they merged it back. I think many have clamored for the restructuring or the review of the security architecture within the country. And as you know, with the challenges as yet, the new minister has his work cut out for him. Some have challenged the fact that he has been many years retired and that what value is he actually going to bring. But like I mentioned, it's all about leadership. To the wisdom as to why the president made that move, we will know in the fullness of time. However, yes, it might not be the first move that many strategic people make, because we've seen a case whereby the service delivery of some of the current service chiefs has not been as stellar as expected. And at some points, people were expecting some form of cabinet or architectural reshuffle. That wasn't done, and it still hasn't been done. So we're hoping that the new minister, and sometimes your experience in a field does add value. We remember when Hamid was made the comptroller of customs. Many didn't expect any form of value add, but he's done quite commendable in that area in terms of restructuring.
So you're quite optimistic that we're going to get.
I am cautiously optimistic.
You're watching Standpoints, and when we come back, we explore more of the ministries and the ministers to whom these portfolios are given, and then we have a new super minister in town. We'll talk about that after this break. You're watching Standpoint, and I've been discussing with DeVeo Okorie, is a public affairs analyst. We've also been looking at the ministerial the ministers that have just been assigned portfolios. Well, before we went on the break, we had explored the issue of insecurity. We talked about power, etc., etc. Now, the economy is wobbly, and global institutions and the CBN have warned of possible relapse into a recession. In the face of mounted debt such as the $81 billion that drains 60% of our public revenue. Looks like there is so much for the new Nigeria's super minister, or Nigeria's new super minister, talking about Zainab Ahmed, as she combines finance, budget, and national planning.
National planning. I am hoping that she will carry it with all the capacity that she requires, because within the last tenure, she wasn't as vocal as we expected. Now, why I say this is because to move the economy forward, the economy is usually a blueprint of your fiscal plan. And we didn't hear much from the fiscal quarters as to the way forward for the country. Now, remember, when the budget is planned, the budget is basically, with all the noise you hear about the budget is basically a roadmap as to how the president intends and will be equipped to deliver his mandates. So we don't expect to be hearing from CBN. Those are monetary policy issues that can be done silently. What we expect to hear is the finance minister working in line with other ministries to ensure that they are equipped or empowered or enriched to be able to deliver their mandates. If you remember some administrations back, we had another super minister in the likes of Okonjo-Iweala who was coordinating Minister of the Economy.
But Zainab Ahmed, not so named that way.
Yes,
but then
not so named.
She's a de facto Minister of Economy.
Yeah, she is. Well, I wouldn't say de facto, because the truth is, we've seen how our president operates. He's not so strong on the economy. He does things sporadically. In some issues where you would expect him to really put his leg on the ground, we've not really seen him react as fast. Remember, a sense of urgency is required. The issue of the subsidy, which takes a large bulk of our funding, that restructuring or the hard decisions to be made to be able to say we're not going to fund subsidy again. Petroleum needs to arrive at a stable price, which is at a market price, so that we save our dearly limited funds to use for infrastructure. Those decisions are ahead of her right now to ensure that she can create necessary funding for all the...
But it looks like the president has some level of trust in her. That
yes,
she would definitely
it's a level of trust. Like I said, it's not her first time. We didn't really hear her strongly as we expected. It is necessary that the fiscal coordinator or the person who's driving the fiscal policy stay at the front. That's the person that people need to be hearing regularly.
Okay, we need to move on because of our time. Now, let's look at another one, which is what some critics are now arguing, that the anti-corruption campaign has faltered and there have been no reforms of justice system. So thus they want the president to justify the reappointment of the AGF, Abubakar Malami, as the Minister of Justice. Are you also one of them?
Well, he is infamous for some decisions that he took. And it would seem as if for someone who was trained in legal jurisprudence that he would be able to advise the government rightly on matters of the courts. And it has been seen that this administration has been selective in its obedience or compliance of court orders. Now, do I expect any difference this time round? No, because most times precedent says everything about what you're going to do. I think the judicial world, from the police to the lawyers to those within the ministries, have a lot to prove this next 4 years in terms of those reforms. I would point also reference the VP. I think for the past record that he has had, I think the presidency needs to tap into that.
Corruption, anti-corruption or anti-graft war is one of the fulcrums of the president, saying we have to stamp out corruption. So do you see that really, the fight against it very effective, playing out, you know, at
Just
this next
take
level?
a look at his ministerial appointees. Some of them have questionable backgrounds that were challenged, which we all are aware of.
Right.
And yet they were appointed. And those are the same people he said he can defend. Now, if that is the modus operandi you take, then I don't really expect that you're going to take a strong stand on corruption. How did insecurity get so bad? Most times where there is no form of concrete justice and equity, many begin to take up arms, many begin to take up self-defense. Crime becomes the norm of the day. So it is still at the front of the president's desk, and he had better take the right decisions, or else you're going to get a chaotic quagmire, a point of, what do you call it, anarchy, where Nigerians begin to find different ways of defending themselves.
Okay, another brawl has been raised concerning the fact that out of the 43 ministers that we have just 7 females. And if you look at what obtains, you know, in the outside world, you have almost the same percentage of, you know, the gender parity. So it has really stirred up the gender parity discourse this time around. So how does that, what does that say to
For me, it's to the loss of Nigerians that we left our greatest consistency out of the leadership fold. And it's not the first time round. Administrations before did increase that. Remember in the last administration, that was the Johnson administration, we had about 30% inclusion of females in the leadership forum. And we have seen, except a few that had 1 or 2 issues, women have always been able to deliver. 2, it's been proven under the United Nations that once you empower a woman, you multiply your economy times 4. So for all that on ground, it beggars belief why this administration did not include a strong fortitude and force in our women within the leadership of the country.
Is it that though we've been saying we also want women governor, we want women president, we want women to be better represented in this country, but it looks like some people are not just coming out?
Well, there's a traditional history to it. Patriarchy has been a challenge of many countries for a long time.
Africanism,
yes,
as well.
I wouldn't just say it's Africanism. I mean, take a look at the American president. However, it is your loss, because it has been proven times without number the power and the value that women bring on board, from the home into the boardroom. So if you blindly or you're in denial as to what they can do, it's to the loss of all Nigerians.
Let us explore the fact that the president created 3 new ministries. This saying humanitarian affairs, disaster management and social development, police affairs and the Ministry of Special Duties and international affairs. These are good.
Yes, the 3 new ministries, which I was surprised about. Already we were dealing with an overbloated government, meaning we had a larger entity than even we could handle. Apart from the fact that funds are not there, because each new ministry will require its own fund, its own personnel, agencies that would come under, agencies that would be created under it, I expected some form of efficient play. The wisdom of why he took those decisions would further come out at the end of the day. Remember, this administration does not have time. Nigeria is many years backward in terms of what it needs to do to achieve its stable social welfare for its citizens. Therefore, we need less government and more the people. You need to empower more of the people. Let government regulate while the private sector and you and me begin to act as the operators and the drivers of building our economy. The more you build a wider government, it just means you're actually slowing down the wheel of progress.
The president might be reacting to the fact that people are criticizing, the performance in the past administration, saying, okay, he's just trying to be very prudent in the way the country or the government spends. Now he's thinking, or probably one of his thoughts is that let us create these ministries so as to reach the grassroots, reach the people.
The same faulty wisdom or strategy when they created 36 universities around. More does not help you. What you have is a case of all motion and no movements. You need to be able to remember you have limited resources. Right. So even if it's a 1 or 2 point agenda, the legacy is that when you are leaving, people can say that this was delivered. Not that at the end of the day, we did A, B, C, but nothing was done.
Anyway, before we move on, before we call it a wrap of the program, I would like to react to the fact that Sunday Dari, who some people say is a right man that has been assigned as the Minister of Youth and Sports. Well, looking at it from the background of what happened in the previous administration.
Yes.
What do you expect?
Well, most times youth and sports has not been given the right attention, and it should. However, it doesn't actually require someone, a technocrat in that industry. I expect Sunday Dari, being his first time at the federal level of ministerial capacity, to give it all that he has, to be able to leave a sterling legacy in the sports and youth. Remember, the sports and youth ministry deals with the largest constituency in Nigeria, which are the youth. There's 75 million of us. So his ministry is no joke. It requires all the seriousness. It requires all the attention. It requires even the rightful communication. He needs to be in tune with his constituency, who are scattered not just within the country, but in the diaspora. Remember, currently we're facing the issues of the youth in taking all manner of illicit activities. He is a key player in ensuring that we can reverse that trend.
I can assure you that all of these messages will get down there to them. But then, lastly, the president says, I'm really going to have to be monitoring what you guys are doing. So he set up the key performance indicators for them. So they are going to be working against this.
Okay.
Is that a good way to ensure that governance is delivered?
Well, we saw in quotes who the president pointed to, of who some people call the prime minister. That's the chief of staff, in terms of channeling meetings as well as all appointments through him. Right. Our president has not been known to be good on checking the performance or taking actions on whether people were erring or defaulting. Right. I recommend to him to make use of his vice president. The vice president can help him in coordination, performance management, and ensuring that maybe on every 100 days, each one of those ministers, 43 of them, give an account of their duties. We're not going to have another Federal Executive Council that only gives contracts on Wednesdays and then they go to sleep for the rest of the days. We want to see the next level. Remember, as I said in the last time I spoke, the first year is to get settled down. The second year is the planning. The third year, they start discussing who's running. The fourth year, none of us begin to see them again until the election time.
All right, all of these things, definitely, just like I said earlier on, that then these messages will really get down there to them. Public affairs analyst, Sunday, DeVeo Okorie.
I wish I was a minister.
You're going to really have to work for it. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Really appreciate your time. It's a wrap on the show, Standpoint. You can always watch the program. Remember, you can watch a repeat of this edition by 7:30 p.m. and tomorrow by 7:30 a.m. I'm Ibrahim Shita. Enjoy your weekend. Bye now.